Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Kris. This is part two, the Bay of Pigs. Castro strikes back. This is the operations room. This is part two. Um, so the other one was called the Bay of Pigs. What was it? I don't have it in front of me. Oh, the Bay of Pigs, the assault begins. That's what it was. So if you haven't watched that one, I already did the reaction to it. Or you don't have to watch my reaction. You can just watch the operations room's version of it. Before we get started, I click that thumbs up. If you can click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, that helps me out. If you don't want to, okay. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button, and you can request a video in the comments. If you do, then you'll be your video. You will be sponsoring that video. Sorry, gotta get some lotion. Hey, shut up. I don't know if anyone likes this stuff. It's aromatherapy, stress relief, eucalyptus, and spearmint. It's Bath and Body Works. I don't go into it. I just order off Amazon. Oh, it's wonderful. Whole hand smells like mint. What a great night. What a great night. Yeah. It is nighttime, by the way, just so everyone knows. It is 9:01, and I am normally in bed at 8:40. So I'm going to knock this one out tonight. I don't have anything else to say, so let's get into it.
I wanted to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for your support over the last 5 years. We've grown into an enthusiastic international team of 15 people. We've loved producing battle map animations for you, and we love hearing how much you enjoy them. We do our absolute best to offer accurate and unbiased recreations of the most important battles and operations of the 20th and 21st century. I hope we've done a relatively good job of this. However, you may have seen among fellow history creators that views on long-form history content across the board are much reduced from even 12 months ago. The YouTube algorithm, which recommends our videos to people who might be interested in watching them, has been updated in a way which intentionally or otherwise suppresses recommendations of history content. With a team of people relying on the monetization that comes from views, and with fewer views with which to negotiate with sponsors, without which we can't produce videos full stop, this has become a major problem for us. Shorts, and YouTube's own ads, which we don't receive any revenue from, also now take up valuable space on the YouTube homepage that would ordinarily be used to recommend long-form content. YouTube's demonetization bots have now run completely out of control, with our second channel, the Intel Report, having been recently completely demonetized by mistake, only to be eventually reinstated after 2 appeals. We continue to be censored from mentioning certain words, people, events, and topics. You may have seen the farcical lengths that we had to go to in a recent video on the reasons for the Iraq War to not mention naughty words. With that in mind, this video is sponsored by our Patreon. We're uploading videos completely ad and sponsor free. We've launched a new Patreon exclusive Q&A series. I intend to also use Patreon as an exclusive release platform for any videos which get demonetized on YouTube. Absolutely no pressure at all, but if you'd like to support us to be able to continue making videos, it would be amazing. Please take a look at patreon.com/the operations room. That's patreon.com/the operations room. No problem.
The only reason why I did not fast forward through that is because it's a problem. I don't cover as much history as obviously like the History Underground and stuff like that, operations room. But yeah, I see the same kind of thing. And if it is put forward just as a reaction, I see very limited ad revenue. I don't see much ad revenue at all, anyways. But most of my money through the channel comes from donations. You know, it comes from you sponsoring, keeping my channel going. You know, because I don't see much through YouTube. So, and I do appreciate that. But yeah, it's a lot of the ads are limited, or what I do see, I don't see much. So it's an issue. All right.
problem at all if you aren't able to support us financially. We appreciate all your support since April 2019. It's 10 AM on the 17th of April 1961. A column of military trucks is approaching Playa Larga, designated as Red Beach by the commanders of Brigade 2506. 2nd Battalion of the brigade is dug in on the road to Playa Larga, creating a choke point that pro-Castro forces will have to breach in order to drive the brigadistas back into the sea. The local commander, Maximo Cruz, orders his men to hold their fire until the very last second. When the column of trucks is almost upon them, 2nd Battalion opens up with machine guns and mortars. A short firefight breaks out as revolutionary militia pile out of the trucks and fire back at Cruz's men. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Cuban exiles' superior training and marksmanship drives the militia back with heavy losses. However, there is no time to celebrate, as Castro's army is preparing to launch a massive attack later in the day. Cruz's victory against the Castro militia is the first bright spot in an otherwise bleak start to Operation Zapata. Brigade 2506 have spent the morning struggling ashore at the Bay of Pigs. The small landing fleet carrying their supplies has been driven off by Castro's air force after heavy losses in the morning, while American leadership continues to debate whether to help the exiles. Feeling as though the CIA has deceived him, President John F. Kennedy is staunchly against openly aiding the brigadistas, while his generals plead with the president to reconsider. At the other beachhead at Blue Beach, more than 20 miles away from Playa Larga, the brigade's commander, Pepe San Roman, is supervising the main landing operation when he is informed that the radios over at Red Beach do not seem to be working. The two beachheads, 20 miles from each other, will instead have to communicate via runner before a replacement radio can be sent in. San Roman sends an M41 tank to Red Beach to bolster their defences. As it turns out, Red Beach is to be Castro's first target as he attempts to drive the exiles back into the sea. At 2:30 PM at Playa Larga, a much larger column now approaches Maximo Cruz's position. This time, the Castroist forces are supported by Second World War-era Soviet T-34 tanks, which greatly outnumber the only M41 tank at Cruz's disposal. The brigadistas once again hold their fire until the last second, before opening up on the enemy. The Castroists bring up their tanks and fire back in a pitched battle. Cruz's men are starting to run low on ammunition when they notice two B-26s circling overhead. The Castroist forces cheer, believing these to be friendly aircraft. The B-26s instead dive on the massed column of men and tanks, dropping bombs and firing rockets into the Castroist forces. These aircraft are in fact piloted by Cuban exiles, who rake the column with gunfire on two more passes before flying back towards Nicaragua. Despite another victory against the government forces, Cruz's men are now desperately low on ammunition with no resupply in sight. After their bombing run, the B-26s turn towards home, and are over the Caribbean when they are set upon by government aircraft. One is shot down by a T-33 jet fighter, while the other, piloted by Jose Crespo, dives close to the water to evade a Hawker Sea Fury. He cannot shake the quicker aircraft, and his engine is damaged by a burst of machine gun fire. Crespo prays for a miracle when the Sea Fury unexpectedly breaks off and flees back to Cuba. An unmarked A4 Skyhawk now pulls up next to the B-26, and the pilot gives him a thumbs up before flying off. The patrolling American fighters from the Essex Carrier Group have been ordered to not engage any non-friendly aircraft within Cuban territorial waters, but their presence is intimidating enough to dissuade Castroist pilots. At 7:30 PM, both brigade beachheads are entrenched in strong positions, but are increasingly pressured by government forces. San Roman estimates that he only has a day of ammunition left, but is confident that the rest of the fleet will return during the night to resupply his men. However, no ships arrive by nightfall as promised. San Roman takes a Zodiac boat 5 miles offshore to look for them, while radioing for help, but to no avail. The brigade is still on its own. At Red Beach, 2nd Battalion is forced to pull back to form a stronger defensive line, but is reinforced by 2 more M41 tanks. Castroist artillery begins falling on their position, but the fire is inaccurate and ineffective. 76.2mm and 122mm batteries fire over 2,000 shells, while the brigadistas wait in their foxholes for the main assault.
2,000 shells. Wow. 2,000 shells, so that's got to be in that night. I don't care if they're not accurate or not. It's not going to make you... I mean, I know they said they bunkered down in their foxholes, but... No. If I was there, I would be tiptoeing backwards this way. This would be me right here. I'm out of the picture. They'd say, didn't you have a foxhole? I did. It was just way down here out of the way of all the murder that I would have been a part of too. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I would have just said, I'm going to dig a foxhole like 15 miles this way. You just come and get me when you need me.
The artillery barrage continues for 5 hours until 12:30 AM on the 18th of April.
So they dropped 2,000 shells, artillery shells, in 5 hours. So 200 an hour. I don't want to break it down per minute, but 200. And so you're talking about not every 3 minutes. I got 3 minutes. What am I doing for 3 minutes? It's not one shell every 3 minutes. Is that three? That's 3 shells a minute. I'm going backwards. So 3 shells a minute. That's over 3 shells a minute that are landing. So you want to break it down any further? It's one every 20 seconds. It's actually less than that because that's only 3 shells a minute for 60 minutes. That's 180, and they're dropping 200. 200 per hour. So you got another 200 spread out over 60. I'm mathing myself out of this one. That's another 3. 180. Oh my goodness, Chris. I've got all these numbers in my head right now. Let's just stick with, they're dropping, how about this? We're going to adjust it. They're dropping 1 about every 17 and a half seconds. 17 seconds, 15 seconds. Or not, the 1 is landing about that distance. There's too much math right now, and it's after 9. My brain is fried. Wow. Yep, I would not want to be there.
When Castro launches a massive nighttime attack with regular army tanks and infantry. 2 T-34-85 tanks reach the crossroads, but both are destroyed by an M41 tank. 2nd Battalion again lets loose with everything.
Okay, sorry. I just had to do some quick math. Check me if I'm right or wrong. 60 minutes in an hour, 5 hours, 300 minutes. 2,000 shells would come out to be 1 shell landing every 6.6 seconds. And after, if you take 6.6 seconds times 300 minutes, it was 1,980. So that doesn't even account for another 20 shells throughout that 5-hour period. But about every 6.6 seconds, a shell was going off. I said 17. I was off. That's what the calculator just said. I'm also tired, so I could still be wrong. Back to the video.
It has, but this time the fire is less effective due to ammunition shortages. The M41 tanks prevent the position from being overrun by firing point blank into enemy tanks, blasting one after another. However, one T-34 breaks through and is confronted by an M41. The Brigadista's M41 rams the Castroist tank in order to block the road before backing away and firing into its track, disabling the T-34. Soon, the narrow road is blocked by burning vehicles, preventing more tanks from reaching the front line. But unlike the previous two assaults, the Castroist forces attack in an endless stream with a seemingly limitless number of infantry. The Castroists charge through the jungle while machine guns rip through their ranks. The battle reaches a climax at 3 AM. The brigade's mortars fire white phosphorus rounds, which ignite jungle trees, covering the area in dense smoke. By 4:45 AM, the M41s have run out of ammunition and are forced to withdraw towards Playa Giron. As soon as they depart, a T-34 makes it through the dense column of knocked-out vehicles and charges Cruz's position. Just when it seems like disaster is imminent, a brigadista on its flank hits the Castroist tank with a bazooka and detonates the vehicle. At dawn, the bulk of Castro's forces finally withdraw after a bloody battle. Shortly after, at 5:45 AM, a single enemy tank approaches the brigade's position, but instead of firing, the tank commander climbs out and asks to see 2nd Battalion's commander, Ernesto Olivia. Upon meeting Olivia, the Castroist tanker says, "I congratulate you because these men are heroes. I would like to fight with you." He also informs Olivia that his force of 370 men has just inflicted 1,500 casualties on the attacking force of 2,100. By comparison, 2nd Battalion has lost 20 men killed and 50 wounded. However, the news is not comforting for Olivia, whose supply situation is dire, and he now understands how outnumbered his men are. It is another victory for the brigade on land, but it will be its last unless ammunition can be delivered. At 9 AM, Olivia decides to abandon Playa Larga, and his men board trucks to attempt to head 20 miles south to Blue Beach to consolidate the brigade's position. The Castroist forces launch smaller attacks on the beachhead at Playa Giron throughout the 18th of April, as Castro readies his army for a breakthrough the following day. Cuban revolutionary aircraft strafe and bomb the beachhead incessantly, while the exiles wonder when the promised American air support will arrive. The men from Red Beach miraculously make it the 20 miles to Blue Beach and pull up with their trucks at 10:30 AM, and Pepe San Roman calls a council of war with Olivia. Both men know the current situation is untenable unless they can get American air support and resupply. Olivia recommends the brigade abandon the Bay of Pigs and fight a guerrilla war in the swamps and mountains of Cuba. During the meeting, San Roman finally receives a message from CIA agent Grayston Lynch, who assures him the transports are headed back to resupply them. "I want you to know that we will never abandon you." Lynch tells San Roman that if his positions are overrun, the brigade can be evacuated by the fleet. The Cuban exile angrily refuses such a suggestion. "I will not be evacuated. We will fight to the end here if we have to." While he rejects Olivia's proposal of evacuation, he decides to stay at Playa Giron to await the incoming supply vessels. He trusts the word of the CIA. In reality, the transports carrying most of the ammunition and food have entirely fled the area. American aircraft search for them, only to find they are over 100 miles away from the Bay of Pigs and sailing towards Central America, their crews having abandoned the mission. This information is not relayed to San Roman on Blue Beach, but Lynch is determined to keep his word. Even worse for the brigade is a message that arrives in Washington from the Soviet government, which insinuates that it will defend Castro's regime with nuclear weapons should the United States openly assist the exiles. Despite this threat, Kennedy offers small concessions to his generals and CIA leadership, who are pleading with him to help the brigade. American air cover is to be provided for a dawn B-26 strike on the Castroist positions at the Bay of Pigs. A-4 Skyhawks from the Essex are not to engage the enemy unless the friendly B-26s or themselves are fired upon. What's left of the brigade's air force in Nicaragua is ecstatic at the news, and they lift off from their airfield with newfound confidence that the invasion can still succeed. This time, 4 of the 6 B-26s are piloted by American aviators from the Alabama Air National Guard. These men have spent the last few months training the Cuban exiles in their aircraft, and now volunteer to help retake their homeland. They have been informed by CIA officials that should they be shot down, the United States will disavow them as mercenaries. Nonetheless, they press on with their brigadista comrades in the hope that this airstrike will turn the tide. When the B-26s reach the Bay of Pigs, they spot aircraft loitering above the battlefield. Believing these aircraft are their promised escort of US Navy A-4s, the bombers split off to prepare their gun runs. Instead, one of the jets turns head-on towards a B-26 piloted by American Riley Schamberger and fires a burst from his machine guns. There is no combat air patrol to help them. A mistake in the orders from Washington has failed to take daylight savings time into consideration. The Essex carrier group has been given the wrong time for the attack, and Castro's air force still controls the skies over Cuba. Schamberger's aircraft is on fire and crashes into the bay, while the rest of the bombers scatter. They are hunted one by one until the Cuban government aircraft run out of ammunition. 2 of the 6 B-26s are shot down, and another is badly damaged. 4 Americans are killed in the attack, including Air National Guardsmen Pete Ray and Leo Baker. They bail out only to be found by Castro's militia and are summarily executed. Their sacrifice is in vain, as the raid fails to hit any targets of value. Ray's body will stay in Cuba for the next 28 years, before his remains are finally repatriated to the US in 1979. The failure of the daylight raid signals the beginning of the end for the Brigadistas. Castro's expected offensive begins at 7:50 am and immediately puts pressure on the beachhead. With ammunition running low on the eastern side of the brigade's line, the parachute leader Alejandro Del Valle jumps on top of one of the last M41 tanks and leads a counterattack against the Castroist forces. Mortar crews behind him fire off the last remaining white phosphorus shells to cover the advance. The sudden charge stuns the attacking Revolutionary Army, and many are killed in the ensuing close quarters fighting. The Brigadistas manage to drive the government army back, and it appears as though the day is won against all odds. However, a Castroist counterattack immediately stops the advance. With the Brigadistas out of ammunition, a retreat to the beach is ordered. Cuban government T-33 jets strafe the retreating men. They soon have nothing to fight back with except their fists, and hand-to-hand combat breaks out as the Cuban government army overtakes the disorganized retreat. With the defensive lines decisively broken, the eastern half of the beachhead collapses into chaos. It is becoming clear to the Cuban exiles' leaders that this is their last stand. Pepe San Roman's messages to the American carrier force become more frantic throughout April the 19th, as Castro's offensive breaks through his lines. Have you quit? Aren't you going to support me anymore? Regardless of whether you help or not, I will fight on. The communications crew aboard the Essex can only sit and listen with mute rage as their allies are abandoned. Grayston Lynch aboard the Blagar requests orders to lead the small exile fleet back to the beach, but he is denied by Washington. Lynch urges San Roman to hold the beachhead as long as possible, but the brigade has finally met its end. He receives one final message at 2:32 p.m. "You won't be here on time. Farewell, friends. I am breaking this radio right now. I'm destroying all equipment and communications. I have nothing left to fight with." Just before the fall of Blue Beach, the destroyers USS Eaton and USS Murray, under the command of Commodore Crutchfield, are ordered to loiter outside Playa Giron to determine if they can evacuate any retreating Brigadistas. They have been ordered not to fire unless fired upon by Castro's forces. When they arrive offshore, the men aboard the American destroyers watch as the Cuban exiles are driven into the water. Some continue to resist the government forces, while others try to swim a mile out to the US ships. Commodore Crutchfield knows these men are doomed, and decides there is nothing he can do for them, especially when taking the hazardous coral into consideration. The destroyers steam away as the Cuban exiles are annihilated. Some men will escape in makeshift rafts, including Alejandro Del Valle. However, the paratroop leader will die of dehydration after his raft is carried into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Only around 30 exiles are rescued by American warships. The Bay of Pigs is a costly disaster for the Cuban exiles and the United States, and a great victory for Fidel Castro's regime. The revolutionary government wipes out the invasion force of 1,500, killing 67 in action and wounding 360. 1,202 exiles are captured in the operation, and a further 24 are either executed or die as a result of deplorable conditions in prison. Despite their defeat, the Cuban exiles performed exceptionally well in combat, inflicting over 2,500 casualties on the Castroist forces. It is, however, in vain, as the lack of supply and air support doomed their effort from the start. Che Guevara sends a personal message to President Kennedy, thanking him for the Bay of Pigs. Before the invasion, the revolution was weak. Now it's stronger than ever. Cuba further embraces communism after the failure of the invasion, and is drawn closer into the Soviet sphere of influence. The inability of American officials to properly gauge the attitude of the Cuban population and incompetent strategic planning eventually led to Brigade 2506's abandonment on the beaches. CIA Director Alan Dulles, along with Chief of Clandestine Services Richard Bissell, resign after the official report reveals their culpability in the disaster. The failure at the Bay of Pigs has a profound impact on the American president. Kennedy will no longer fully trust the military establishment. This is to have wide-reaching consequences when the Soviet Union places nuclear missiles in Cuba the following year. It also strengthens his resolve to combat global communism, leading him to increase America's military presence in South Vietnam. The Cuban exiles taken prisoner by Castro remain in custody for over a year. Some are executed by the regime after show trials. On the 21st of December 1962, an agreement between the Cuban government and the United States allows for the release of the Bay of Pigs prisoners. The last Cuban exile will leave his homeland for the final time in 1980.
There was so much more to that I did not know. I mean, obviously I could have looked it up, but it's never been a subject that I really had interest in. Then I saw the video and I just, wow. I didn't realize the U.S. was as involved. I just really thought it was CIA kind of doing their own thing with some of the generals in place being very hell or high water. We'll get it done, you know, and we don't need Kennedy. We don't trust him. Who is that guy? Yeah. It's upsetting to know we were that guilty of it. But nothing that can happen now. I'm going to end this here. Till next time, have a good day, have a good night.